Great.
Okay, ready? Okay. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Councillor Rawlson King's 2024 budget consultation for Ottawa's BIPOC communities. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sophia Jacob, and I'm the Equity Diversity Liaison with the Office of Councillor Rawlson King, and I'll be the facilitator for today's conversation. We would also like to welcome the community members who are joining us through Zoom. This meeting is being recorded for information purposes and will be later uploaded for folks who missed it. This evening, Councillor King will be sharing many important updates and information. However, we'll also be looking to engage in a healthy dialogue that can help to provide feedback towards the 2024 budget. Aaron and Athena are here from the Councillor's office as well to provide support in French language translation. I also want to acknowledge Michelle, who is supporting us with the participants on the Zoom call. We also would like to thank Bacchanal, a Black-owned catering company here in Ottawa and located in Councillor Rawlson King's ward. She provided the food. We'll head to the land acknowledgement. We recognize that Ottawa is located on the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and we extend all of our respect to First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. It is also important to honor and respect those ancestors who have lived on this territory for a millennia and whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. I'll now move to the ancestral land acknowledgement. We also recognize the continent of Africa as the cradle of humanity. We extend our respect to all people who identify as African, Caribbean, and Black, and the contribution they have made to the development of human civilization. We recognize that we are in the latter part of the UN Decade for People of African Descent. Under the themes of recognition, justice, and development, we take this opportunity to reflect on our current condition in this country and continue to work with our allies towards making long-term improvements to the lives of our diverse people on this shared land. We do have some meeting guidelines, so we do kindly ask that there be no interruption when others are speaking, and that you please hold any questions until we open the floor to participants to speak. There will also be an opportunity to have an open discussion when we open the floor for Q&A for this portion of the meeting. We ask everyone who is on Zoom to please put yourselves on mute. For those of you who are on the Zoom platform and would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, turn your camera on, and you will be placed in the order of the speakers list. Or, however, if you would like to choose not to speak, but you still want to ask a question, please type it in the chat box. We will try to answer as many questions from both the floor here and on the call. Again, for Francophone participants on the Zoom call and here, Athena's here, and Michelle will be supporting via the Zoom call. If you have any Ward 13 Rita Rockcliffe ward-specific questions or concerns, we'll be happy to give you the information before you leave, and we'll also type it in the chat. I'm now going to pass it to Councillor King for his opening remarks and introduction of our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and welcome everybody. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Good evening, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining us for this virtual budget consultation, as well as a hybrid consultation. So we're really excited because this is a new format as we've emerged out of the pandemic to have everybody gathered here together, as well as people gathered online. So I'm really pleased that we could have this budget consultation primarily for the Black, Indigenous and racialized residents of our city. I'm Rawlson King, je m'appelle Rawlson King. I'm the Councillor for Rita Rockcliffe, and I'm pleased to provide this equity budget session in my capacity as Council Liaison for Anti-Racism and Ethnocultural Relations Initiatives to provide residents with an opportunity to provide input on where the city's priorities should be focused for its upcoming 2024 budget. It's important to note that the budget has not been tabled yet. We think it is important for us to listen to people first and then set priorities. I'd like to also echo what Sophia had said as well. Though this meeting is being held remotely through Zoom, and we're meeting virtually as well as in a hybrid format, the land on which Ottawa is built upon is unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that the people of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and we honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contribution to this land. I know Sophia had outlined some housekeeping items, but I will underline them. Please note that we are recording this session and we'll post it on my office's YouTube channel so that more people, as many people as possible, will be able to get the message and will be able to participate in the further discussions that we have concerning the budget. And if you don't want to appear on video, we invite you online to turn your video off. Please place your microphone on mute until a moderator invites you to ask a question. And to see the person who's speaking online, select speaker view instead of gallery view. This evening, we're pleased to be joined by Joseph Mahoney, Deputy City Treasurer for Revenue for the City of Ottawa. And we're going to invite him up in a second. But I also want to take this opportunity to thank BIA Media, who is providing media production for this event. We also want to acknowledge the Association of Black Entrepreneurs and Professionals of Ottawa-Gatineau here at the 235 Hub, where we are having our meeting today. Their mission is to develop the potential of the next generation of Black business leaders here in the national capital region by facilitating personal development and by providing a platform for mentoring and training. So we're just excited to be here, and I'm also excited to invite Joseph here to provide a presentation on the city budget process. So Joseph will be joining us for that.
Awesome.
And so we'll start with the first set of slides, the city presentation on the budget.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Mahoney. I am the Deputy Treasurer for Revenue Services here at the City of Ottawa. And I'm really excited to be here this evening for this consultation. And attending with me today's consultation, I have Suzanne Schnaub. She's one of my colleagues. She's the manager for financial services here at the City of Ottawa, so she's attending virtually. So as I go through the presentation, once we move into the question and answer session, I may pull on some of her experience if there's some issues that may come up that I may not have an answer. As we noted, I think we're going to try and answer all the questions that we can today here. And if there's some that we can't, we'll certainly look to get back to the councilor's office and get those responses back to you. So again, thank you so much, Councillor, for the invite, and thank you so much for coming.
We're just waiting for the Zoom, for the presentation to pop up on the Zoom. So once that is launched, then we're going to be able to move forward. And there we go.
Awesome. Okay, great. So we can advance to the next slide. Okay, so when planning for today's session, we had one goal in mind, and that is to help our residents better understand and become more engaged in the city's budget process. So we hope that the information from today's presentation helps everyone here have a more meaningful discussion with your community members, your ward councillors, on the city's 2024 draft budget. So we'll kind of get into a little bit of history, not really old history, but recent history. So immediately following last year's budget, our staff consulted with every councillor in our residence in order to get feedback and suggestions for the improvement to the city's budget process. Over the last several months, we've been working very, very closely with the mayor's office to incorporate the input that we've received and seek new and improved ways to, number one, increase overall engagement and interest in the city's budget process, make the budget information easier to understand and to access, provide information to residents that they care about most, and make the budget information easier to understand, therefore increasing overall budget literacy. Okay, so in today's presentation, we'll break it down to three sections. The first one is municipal budget basics. The second will be the budget process and development, and then finally we'll move to a question and answer section. So today's presentation will not touch on any specific details on the city's 2024 budget. Those details will be released when the budget's tabled on November 8th. Okay, we can advance to the next slide. Thank you. So in this section, our first section here on municipal basics, we will cover the requirement for the city to have a balanced budget under the Municipal Act and what that means, the differences between an operating and capital budget, what the funding sources are for the operating and capital budgets, and the city's various budgets and tax levies. And finally, we'll touch on user fees and charges. Can advance. Okay, so let's start with the Municipal Act and the balancing of the budget. So every year, the City of Ottawa produces a municipal budget, and it is one of the most important documents because the budget is a blueprint that defines how resources are going to be collected and allocated throughout the financial year. So the budget is made up of two main components, the operating budget and the capital budget. The Ontario Municipal Act provides rules for municipalities to prepare their budgets and through bylaws, and a municipality cannot have an operating deficit. So compared to federal and provincial governments that are allowed to, say, have deficits and they can spend more than they're actually bringing in, municipalities have to prepare a balanced budget every year. So the Act requires that expenditures must equal revenues, or put simply, the money out must be equal to the money coming in when we are building and adopting the overall budget. Okay, so to balance the budget, the city can either increase its revenues using tools such as property taxes, we can use fees, or through managing expenses through efficiencies and continuous improvements to continue to focus on providing services for value for money. Okay, we can advance.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's start with the operating budget. What is an operating budget? The operating budget covers the ongoing day-to-day expenses that a municipality incurs to provide programs and services to residents, including items such as staff salaries, emergency services such as fire, paramedic, bylaw, recreation programs, facilities, maintenance, winter operations, and utilities, just to list a few examples. Compared to personal budgeting, this is the equivalent of buying groceries, clothing, paying for hydro, water bills, paying for insurance as comparable examples. So these are things that just kind of happen that we have to sort of deal with on an ongoing basis every year. In comparison, capital budgets are plans for the acquisition and replacement of tangible capital assets, which are defined as significant expenditures to provide municipal services with a benefit beyond 1 year. So the capital budget excludes the cost of operating these services, which form part of the operating budget. The capital budget is developed in accordance with the council-approved official plan, transportation master plan, the infrastructure master plan, development charge background studies, and various long-range financial plans. It covers long-term investments such as roads, paving and resurfacing, sidewalks, new investments in new facilities and investments to maintain existing facilities, bridges, parks, infrastructure, water treatment plants, pumping stations, water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure such as underground pipes, and traffic control devices such as PXOs, to list a few examples. So compared to personal budgeting, this is the equivalent of, say, buying a new car, replacing your furnace, building an addition to the house, replacing your roof, as comparable examples. So these are big expenditures. They're one time, and we're trying to do something different. We can move to the next slide, please. So let's move to funding sources. So the operating budget funding sources include annual property taxes. So this is our citywide levy, our transit levy, our police levy, and these are all listed in on your property tax bill. We have user fees and charges, and a good example of user fee charges is your water bill. We have assessment and growth related revenues. So these are revenues that come from additional properties that are built during the course of the year. We have provincial and federal funding. We have payments in lieu of taxes, and those are payments or tax payments that are made by federal governments. As you know, Ottawa has a very big footprint in terms of government properties, being the capital of the nation. And finally, investment incomes and dividends. So capital budget funding sources include, again, annual property taxes, development charges, federal and provincial funding, but we also use debt. In Ontario, municipalities can issue long-term debt to fund capital programs. However, as per the Municipal Act, they may not commit to more than 25% of the total own source revenue to long-term debt as other long-term obligations. The City of Ottawa's fiscal framework further limits that debt level to 7.5%. So we're not really looking to get to the 25%, even though we can get there. We limit ourselves to that 7.5% here in Ottawa. And finally, in terms of capital budget funding sources, we have water fee rates, water utility fees, rate-supported infrastructure. So that's for water, wastewater, and stormwater. We can move to the next slide. So the city has four major budget categories or groupings. The first three on this slide are tax-supported, transit, and police, are each funded through their own separate tax, each with their own tax levy. The fourth, rate-supported, is funded through water utility charges, and I'll explain each one of these to you in details over the next few slides. We can move to the next one. All right. Okay, so let's start with a citywide tax-supported budget. So this is a little bit of overview. I know you might have seen these levies on your tax bill, but we'll kind of be going through what they actually mean and how we actually use them. So the majority of city programs are funded by annual property taxes. So these program services are referred to as tax-supported services and are funded by the citywide tax levy on the property tax bill. Property taxes are the largest single source of revenue for the city, and it represents approximately 46% of our annual revenue. Examples of tax-supported programs or services includes road and winter maintenance, and we have winter coming up, parks, recreation facility services and programs, libraries, public health, paramedics, community and social services, fire services, and the Office of the Auditor General. It's important to note that some tax-supported programs receive provincial funding. For example, public health is 75% funded by the province and 25% by the city. Paramedics are funded 50% by the city and 50% by the province. Community and social services with a variety of different, have a different variety of different funding percentages depending on the program. We can advance to the next slide. So let's talk about transit service budget. So the budget for the city's transit service is funded through a separate tax on the property tax bill, and it's called the transit levy. This transit levy is its own separate tax stream. The city's fiscal framework recommends that transit fares cover at least 55% of the transit costs, and 45% be delivered through the transit levy. Transit services receive federal and provincial funding through provincial and federal gas tax. The city's transit services fall under the authority of the Transit Commission, and it includes services provided by OC Transpo, Paratranspo, and the city's LRT. Moving on to the next piece, which is the police budget. So the budget for the city's police services is funded through a separate tax on the property tax bill called the police levy. The police levy is its own separate tax stream on the property tax bill, and the Ottawa Police Service falls under the authority of what we call the Police Services Board. Okay, we can advance to the next slide. So let's talk about the rate-supported budget. The city's water, wastewater, and stormwater services are funded through a separate user fee charged to residents on their bi-monthly water utility bill or as a fee on their property tax bill. These programs, services, are referred to as rate-supported services. Example of rate-supported program services include drinking water purification, delivery of water to residents and businesses, collection and treatment of wastewater, stormwater management, water meter installation, and life cycle. So the budget for the City of Ottawa's rate-supported services falls under the authority of the Environmental and Climate Change Committee and is directed by the council-approved rate long-range financial plan. I'll go off script here for a second and just talk about rate-supported infrastructure, because this is infrastructure that people don't tend to see a lot of. And it's there, we just have tons of it, and it's underground. So a lot of times people are saying, what are you talking about, all this infrastructure? And it's not like any other infrastructure that we can see, because we can see roads, we can see, a lot of other infrastructure that's above ground, we can see where our money's going. But when it comes to water, wastewater, and stormwater, all this stuff is underground. And we have thousands and thousands of kilometers of piping that helps to either deliver water to your home, take it out of your home as wastewater, and also drain our streets whenever there's rain or melting and that kind of stuff. So just kind of wanted to throw that in there as a little extra tidbit. And now I'll get back on script. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. The Municipal Act, let's talk user fees and charges. So the Municipal Act allows municipalities to impose fees and charges to cover the costs of delivering services in their jurisdiction. Revenues from the fees are used to offset the costs of providing the goods or the service. The Municipal Act prescribes that various areas that are where fees can be exposed. Examples of user fees and charges include transit fares, recreation program fees, facility arena rentals, building permits, parking permits, and water utility fees. We can advance to the next slide. So we'll move on to the second section, which is the budget process and the development of the budget. So to recap, we've covered budget basics, and now we'll delve into the budget process and how the budget's developed, the committee structure and the budget books, the 2024 budget enhancements, and the term of council priorities, and finally the 2024 council and committee meeting schedule. We can advance to the next slide, okay? So the budget process. So beginning with the budget process itself, I would like to reiterate that the budget process is a year-round process, and we will go over the budget directions, the public engagement, and the budget tabling and the adoption. We can advance to the next slide. Okay, so let's start with budget directions. So the budget cycle formally kicks off with the council-approved budget directions report. So for the 2024 budget, this was approved by council on September 13th. The budget directions report identifies the approach and the timetable, plus the upper limit for tax increases to the citywide police services and transit levies. In addition, it identifies the guiding principles and fiscal framework to develop the budget that includes, but is not limited to, forecasting revenues, determining the rate program increases, and changes to user fees and user charges through the budget process. We can move to the next piece. Okay, so public engagement. So another key component of the budget process is public engagement. Opportunities for residents to share feedback are either contacting your ward councillor, online engagement. We have a survey out there on Engage Ottawa, councillor-led public consultations, such as the one that we're having here today. So all these are opportunities for residents to engage. And new this year, we will have enhanced social media posts. We will have advertisements at city facilities and promotional videos on how to engage on the city budget. This video will be provided to councillors for promotion. We can advance to the next slide. Okay, so the city's draft budget is tabled at council. The city's budget is broken down into a series of budgets organized by each of the standing committees, and each committee is forwarded their own draft budget for deliberation and review. Each standing committee will review its draft operating and capital budgets for the city programs and departments under their mandate, and they will make recommendations regarding the draft budgets, which are then forwarded to council for consideration and debate. After all the standing committees have reviewed and made their recommendations regarding the draft budgets, council then reviews the budget recommendations at the same time. And after council has reviewed and voted on all the committee budget recommendations, the final city budget is adopted. We can advance to the next slide. So we'll touch on the committee structure. So each city service area reports to a standing committee, as we've mentioned, and the budget books are organized by standing committee. And they include the detailed budget information for various city programs, services under the purview of each. And as we've noted there, this year, the tabling will be on November 8th. And then between November 8th and December 6th, there will be a series of committee meetings, which each committee will deliberate its budget. And then finally, on December 6th, we will move on to the adoption. So 2024 budget enhancements. We can advance to the next slide. So enhancements are based off feedback since the 2023 budget. The goal of these enhancements is to improve budget literacy and improve engagement by removing barriers to participate. Enhancements are listed on the slide, but of note, some enhancements are in today's, never mind that. We're introducing a new 2024 budget tool, plus enhanced reporting and online content, right? So some of the things I think you can expect to see there is you'll have a new look and feel. We're going to have more visuals, I think, for people to see, because traditionally we've produced the budget. We have, it's a very technical book. It has a lot of details. But because it has a lot of details, because we're such a large corporation and we have so many functions that we deliver, we sometimes lose people in the details, and it's very difficult for people to follow. So what we're trying to do is sort of simplify this and allow people to really sort of follow it and really understand where, your money as taxpayers goes, and you can really then be able to provide general feedback in terms of how you see the city using its funds as we move forward. So ultimately, we're looking to create an understanding of the investments that are being made across the services and programs that serve our community. All right. Okay, so, and right there on the slide, we've listed a couple of things that I mentioned earlier in terms of how we're looking to sort of continue to engage the public. And we'll continue to make improvements in the future. I think this is our first year we're sort of making these enhancements, and I think there's more in the works as we continue to move forward to make this a much more engaging process for our residents. And I think the fundamental foundation for that is making sure that residents can first understand the budget in order to be able to provide meaningful feedback. Okay, we can move to the next slide. So let's talk about the term of council priorities. The 2024 budget will ensure and highlight its alignment with the term of council priorities that are seen on this slide. And there are 4 council priorities that council approved earlier this year. And the first one is a city that has affordable housing and is more livable for all. A city that is more connected, with reliable, safe, and accessible mobility options, a city that is green and resilient, and a city with a diversified and prosperous economy. So our budget will aim to sort of really align itself with these 4 priorities that Council approved earlier this year. We can move on to the next slide. So here you can, a lot of dates, but really what this outlines is all the different committee dates. And again, this information will be posted online as Councillor King said. So you can access this. This information is also available on our website, ottawa.ca, the corporation's website. So you can access it there and either follow the committee discussions. You'll also have opportunities to contribute. But and each of those committees, as we mentioned, has responsibility for different services across the city. All right, so all this will continue between November the 8th and go all the way to December 6th. And December the 6th is when we have that final deliberation and the adoption of the final budget by Council. So with that, I'll pause and we'll open the floor for questions.
Absolutely. But before we do, I really want to thank you, Joseph, for providing that primer. I think what we heard in the last budget cycle from Council, and I actually do want to acknowledge the fact that we do have a number of councillors here today. So we have Councillor Plante, who represents Rideau Vanier. So thank you for hosting us here at the 235 Hub. And we also have River Ward Councillor Riley Brockington as well. And I'd also like to acknowledge the support that we've received in terms of getting the message out about this specific budget consultation for our diverse communities. So Councillor Lowe from Barrhaven, as well as Councillor Lane Johnson, ensured that the message was spread. So we do appreciate that fact. And as I was saying, Council did want to make the budget process more accessible to people, but in order for it to be accessible, people have to fully understand the nature of the services that the municipality provides. And so it's important to have this process. And so now we do want to open up the floor if there are any questions from the first phase that you've heard. So I see a hand raised. Please come to the mic, and Joseph will be happy to attempt to answer your question.
Well, Joseph, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
For the first time. Thank you, Councillor King, Councillor Plante, and Councillor Brockington. My question is a tough question, but please don't take this the wrong way. It's not personal. And I would say that you evaluate my question based on whether what I'm saying is true or not, not based on whether you like the content. It is my point of view, and I'm correct, that, and it hurts me to say this, but I believe that Council is misleading the Black community on one issue. And I'll tell you what that issue has to do with the police budget. As we speak today, there's a regulation that gives Council the power to determine what information they want to see from the police board. Now, the chief has that power. The OPSB has that power to disclose personal information. I'm talking now regarding police complaints. But they can de-identify the names. So there's also, I don't want to get into the legal, but I'm telling you that just trust me, the chief has the power. The OPSB has the power. Now, Council has the power, but the OPSB have to agree. So based on the regulation, once every 3 years, they can do a business plan. They can also tell OPSB what information that they want to receive. Right now, there is no business plan. So the OPSB is acting, they're in violation, and Council. So Council should do a financial resource plan. The idea that Council cannot speak to the OPSB budget, yes, every year. But once every 3 years, the Ontario government gave them power through the legislation to actually prioritize police services. And I'll tell you, you might be shocked to hear this. According to the regulation, the only thing that can be outsourced is criminal investigations. Every other thing that the police is doing can be outsourced to other city staff or private sector people or Black community. And just to say, well, what's the benefit? What's the budget benefit? I'm pro-police, but the reality is because of the job, they earn 35% more than city staff. So even if you take the same job that the police are doing and you give it to city staff, give an example. Investigations. There were issues with the police. They gave it to an outside law firm. Now, even if they promised, this was regarding female police officers, they promised that they were going to outsource it, but they never kept their promise. Even if they gave it to the Auditor General, the City Auditor General, they still save 35%. So, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but my question is this. I'm willing to provide a one-page of what I've just told you. I would like the city to put their response in a one-page as well and post it on the website. Because I don't want to take up your time to prove to you that what I'm saying is correct. But I know that a councillor agreed to introduce a motion. He agreed with me. I met with not just him and his staff. Well, I wasn't going to say him. It could have been a she. So let's just say a councillor. Met with his staff. Agreed. He said he would do it after the last budget. And we went very far in the process and somehow went silent. So when I tell you, I'm not going to say much more, but when I tell you that council is misleading the black community, I know what I'm saying. Regarding the police budget, council is misleading the black community. Today, there is no business plan. Council has a right to call the OPSB, do the business plan, and then within the regulation, it says that they must consult us in that business plan. So my ask is, if I provide you a one-page proving all these things that I've told you, and I have more to say, but I'm not going to take up the time, are you willing, because I know we've had this conversation before, and I don't want a situation where nothing happens. So are you willing, if I provide what I've just said in one page, would you be willing to respond in one page and put it on the website so that the black community can know? It's either I'm lying or council is misleading the black community. There is no middle ground. So, but the public should be able to read what the black liar is saying, alleged, and what council is saying, and then the public should be able to decide who's lying. One of us is lying. I'm telling you today.
So we appreciate the question. I can just talk from the political side. So I don't recall the committee that this was raised, but I do remember that Councillor Devine had asked a line of questioning to staff around the capacity for council to evaluate the business plan for the police services. And the response was that that was more of a structural element than a substantive element. So the response that I remember is that if you're talking about the substance of what the Police Services Board has responsibility over, it's not applicable in terms of the business plan itself. Now, the business plan would be dealing with administrative issues. And so that was our understanding from staff. But as to your request, I think it's reasonable to ask staff to put that in writing. But that's what I recall from a specific meeting that was on record. So it was a quorum-based committee-type meeting where the question was asked of staff by Councillor Devine.
And if I might just, and will the city's response be on the website?
Well, I would have to talk to staff, but I think it's fair to ask staff that question on your behalf and have a written response because there was an answer that was provided orally to councillors.
So,
And I appreciate that. And I just want to this is an important point. This is why I came.
You can wrap up after
I
this.
drove.
I'll give you 30 seconds and you can wrap.
I hear you, and I really apologize. I drove 1 hour to ask this question.
Oh, absolutely.
And all I'm asking, I've been interacting with the city. All I'm asking is, will you post the city's response, my one page, I'm committing to one page, will you post the city's response and my one page on the website so the black community can see who is speaking the truth?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we can make the request of staff. Of course, staff controls the website. It's the politicians who and the elected officials who ask the questions, and we create inquiries all the time.
And I
So,
apologize if I made any strong words, but
no, not at all. I thought it was very respectful, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Councillor King just said here. So I think it's more your question. I think is more related to governance issues, right? So it's not an issue that one that staff can really sort of speak to. We're there to implement the mandate, and we sort of do the work that council actually assigns us to do. But you're asking questions I think are more governance related, right? And I think they probably sit better, I think, with the Ottawa Police Services Board, right? And the Ottawa Police itself. In terms of response that would need to come from staff, the Ottawa Police is a sub-corporation of the City of Ottawa proper, right? So, again, we'd be more than happy to receive that, and as Councillor King said, we would then take it from there.
I appreciate your comments, Joseph. I'll put the one page together. I'll send it to Councillor King, and I'm being frank. If the response and my one page is not posted on the website, I will continue to say that council is misleading the black community. Whether anybody believes me or not, I will continue to say that if my one page and the city's response is not on the website.
And I would just say to that, at the end of the day, councillors can make inquiries, and all inquiries are answered by staff, and all inquiries are ultimately, all those answers are posted to the website. So, we're willing to look at that for you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, King.
I'm happy to be here tonight and to have questions and to see also as a communist in here in Ottawa, in your writing or other writings, all these budgets have been laid out by the city of Ottawa. I believe most of communities are not benefit from it. It's about to hear the city has passed the budget 2020, 2022, 2020, and so on. But most of the organizations which have been held by the black communities or the newcomers which are in here living, I don't think that they have a contacts with the city. And city has been ignoring those organizations which are supposed to be supported by the city, because most of provincial budget to the city of Ottawa, it's concerning also that it has included the other organization which they don't have no capacity in order to have a communication with the city, and also it's supposed to be, to be informed. Not all of these organizations are giving any opportunities to check in the city of Ottawa or check on the government's website in order to get the budget. So most of the communities, we see that in black communities are increased on the street. And they in the same time, they have organizations, and those organizations, within this budget, they don't get anything from it. So how we can be able to communicate within black communities or in my communities or other communities which are in the city here, so that they can be able to benefit from all this budget have been laid out by the city. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll be brief. I think that's one of the reasons why we're holding this public consultation. This is the reason why we established the Anti-Racism Secretariat in 2020. This is the reason why we have a strategy for anti-racism that was passed in 2022. And I'm also going to have another presentation that will deal specifically with the equity elements and issues that we've heard. And we want you to know as well, when we get to that presentation, we're going to have even another presentation talking about addressing social service investments and other investments in the African Caribbean Black community that we've heard has been a challenge. So what we want to do is respond. Of course, the challenge is I'm as I want to see rapid change like you do as well.
Yeah.
But there's a process. And so what I'm happy to say is that I think that we are making progress in terms of changing some of the structures at the city that will allow the community to access more resources from the city and from the city budget. So this is what this is all about. I'm going to have another presentation that I'm going to give that will talk about a budget survey that we undertook that really reflects some of the things that you're saying, and then also the strategy that we're going to undertake to ask for resources, more resources for diverse communities in following budgets.
Yeah,
Thank
that's,
you.
That one thing goes. We just hear yearly about the budget is coming. Budget 24, budget 25, budget and so on. But we don't benefit from it. And we just look and nobody.
Yeah, and so we need to, so at the end of the day, we need to listen,
Yeah.
and we have to assess what resources are required for the community, and then we have to make the asks. And so we're starting to work on that to ensure that we quantify gaps, especially in social services that need to be filled. And so that's a process. It does require consultation. And we have to acknowledge that our budgets are constrained at the municipality. I think you heard Joseph talk about what we need to pay for. I mean, it's not sexy, but infrastructure needs to be paid for. The other element around city budgets is that a lot of the spending is mandated, so people don't realize that. Once you get through mandated spending, you don't have a tremendous amount of money to spend that's discretionary. But where the discretionary money is available, we want to ensure that there is more opportunities for diverse communities to access those dollars and to access those mandated dollars, such as social service provision. So I want you to just hang in with us, because I'm as aggravated as you are in terms of speed. There's such a thing as speed of government. It does take a while for things to change. But over the last 4 years that I've been in office, I have seen demonstrable change, I believe, in terms of the structure. And once we change the structures, we can actually see changes to the funding. So, we're gonna continue to talk about that, but we're hearing you.
So, Counselor, the next person is on Zoom to ask a question. I think her name is Velvet, so if you can just take the question there.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Velvet, my pronounce okay then. The Cabinet Council created a report in 2021 about maybe art participation, health and well-being. And there were two key findings from that report. There is a strong connection between cultural participation and health. And the second is that there's solid evidence of a connection between cultural participation and mental health. So I respect that in this session today, you're not doing specific line items, but as a community member and creative person, I'm asking if you can share what level of support or how much you're going to champion creative Ottawans like myself in seeing a budget increase this year for the Arts Council and other cultural organizations.
Well, I thank you for that question, and of course, we're always going to make inquiries for improvements to cultural budgets. I have a special relationship with the artistic community, because I always like to note that my wife is an Indigenous art curator. I have a special appreciation for the arts. I was actually the president of one of our artist-run centers for a good number of years, Gallery 101. And I'm always making inquiries as to what the cultural sector requires in terms of increases and investments. So we just want you to know that we have made those inquiries actually with staff. We actually did that. My office did that within the last couple of weeks. But we're always going to advocate for more investments. Where we're also excited is investments in arts for diverse communities. And you might have noticed with the art gallery, with our municipal art gallery, the Ottawa Art Gallery, that there are emerging programs specifically for diverse communities, including the Black community, the Asian community. And we're proud of that, and we want to see expansion of that. So I just want you to know that that is something that, I personally advocate for. Of course, we have to understand that there are constraints in the budget, whether it's budget direction or the requirements of the services that need a proper level of funding. So there's always going to be those pressures, but you have a strong advocate with me in terms of the arts and culture, and also for, frankly, advocating for more diversity in terms of the cultural funding that the city pays for.
Thank you for that
I'd just
response,
like to-
Councillor.
just-
You wanted to
Yeah,
respond?
just
Go ahead.
add one more thing there, Councillor King, King's comments in regards to this question, the previous one. I'd noted earlier in my presentation, in terms of budget asks and, things that we'd like to see in the budget, I like to say, every time throughout the year is budget time, right? The best time to start your consultations is right after the budget's been passed. So December 8th, you get the 24 budget passed, start talking to your councillor about things you'd like to see in the 25 budget, right? Because the sooner you can get those asks into the councillor, the sooner he can start making inquiries. You're giving him a little bit more of a runway in terms of, being able to advocate for you and trying to get these things sort of, into the next budget. Trying to get them in much later in the process when we're sort of down to the wire and, everybody's sort of in there trying to get their asks in becomes a little bit more challenging. But if you can get these things started sooner, the better. So could be in the summertime, could be in the winter, spring. At some point, make an appointment with your counselor. Let them know what things are, areas you'd like to see improvements in, because, we're sort of consulting for budget pretty much throughout the year. It's not just one season. We're collecting feedback and engagement pretty much throughout the year.
That's absolutely correct. I just wanted to briefly say that that's the nature of our job. We're always listening. It's one of the reasons why we're at a tremendous number of community events as city councilors. It's not just for photos. Some people think that. For me, it's listening to the community, seeing what their needs are, and being able to advance those questions in the interim before the budget. And I think that has paid a tremendous amount of dividends. So, please.
Thank you. Oops. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me. So thank you so much for this opportunity to discuss the budget. My name is Camelia Tieba. I was wondering, what is the city planning to do to address the affordable housing crisis that we have in the city, and what can citizens do to really push that issue forward, because it's becoming very dire for many people.
Do we want to hold that, or do we want to?
Well, I can quickly speak
respond
to
to
it.
it? Okay.
I believe that we need to have a manifold increase in the investments that we make in affordable housing. And I think it's safe to say that many of my colleagues believe the same thing. And we're starting that process in terms of reviewing our 10-year affordable housing plan to ensure that we can more effectively address affordable housing. But to me, it's a number one priority in the ward. The thing I'm the most proud of was being able to secure within the first years, the first year and a half of being in office, $15 million from the annual affordable housing funds that we allocate to start building 271 affordable units in Wateridge Village at the Mikanak development. And so I worked through a process with Ottawa Community Housing where we secured the dollars, we turned the sod, and now we're nearing completion of those buildings. But I agree with you, we need more. And so, the city has signed the pledge for 151,000 new units. There are structural challenges to doing that, not just the city standing in the way in terms of application speed, et cetera, but we also have a labor challenge in terms of delivering and constructing those units. But what I can say without a doubt is that the majority of my colleagues around the table are dedicated to ensuring that we enhance affordable housing and we try to build it as fast as possible, and also focus on transitional housing for our newcomers, for immigrants, so that they have sufficient housing when they come to the city. The challenge is agreement as to how to get there. And of course, that's what happens at council. But my feeling is that you will see an acceleration in terms of these discussions. The mayor, I know, is having discussions with senior levels of government to attempt to secure more dollars for affordable housing so that we can accelerate its construction. The other thing that's important is that we want the affordable housing and the supportive housing because we know that shelters don't work. And we don't want to see people just being, shifting from shelter to shelter. We want them to have homes. And so the idea that people are, going in and out of shelters every 15 days, every 30 days, the fact that people are living in their cars is unacceptable. And so I just want you to know that I think that that's something that we've heard loud and clear, that I think council in total is dedicated to working on as a serious challenge. There are structural issues and finance issues that surround that, but we're going to continue to work on those issues. So we heard that loud and clear. 2 days ago, I held a ward-specific consultation. Affordable housing was at the top of the list. So we hear you.
Okay, just to ask a follow-up question. So, yes, to construct, to building new houses, but how about regulating the rent hikes that a lot of Ottawans have been experiencing, where there's no regulations in terms of how much a landlord can increase rent, and that's in this economic climate, it's putting a lot of people under undue pressure.
Just before you respond, we're going to pause on any questions from the chat and from here on the floor after you respond, because we have to move on to the next presentation. So thank you for your question.
Okay, so I just wanted to say there is regulation in place. It's so city does not regulate rent increases, but there is provincial regulation in terms of how much a landlord can increase rent. And generally that direction is published by the LTB, which stands for the Landlord Tenant Board. Okay, so every year there is a published amount which they cannot exceed. And if they do exceed that, you have an opportunity to go and file a claim before the Landlord Tenant Board, and you could, if you've been paying that, you could get that back in refunds. But generally, they will look at the landscape of the entire province, and they'll say, okay, this is the maximum that is reasonable, right? And so some landlords will increase up to the maximum that's allowed, but others may decide not to increase. Others may increase only a little bit, but there is a maximum cap every year that is in place that is regulated, that should not, landlord should not exceed.
Thank you for your question, and also thank you for your response. We are going to move on to the next presentation, so thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And so I'm going to have a brief presentation that will talk to some of the issues that you raised, Francis, about specific needs for the diverse communities. So Michelle, if you can launch my presentation, that would be great. That's great. And we can go to the next slide. So I'm really pleased that you're here tonight. I won't go into too much detail with this slide, but I did show it 2 nights ago in my ward-specific consultation. It's important that you're here because obviously we are talking about the allocation of resources, prioritizing community needs, ensuring that city government is accountable and is transparent. And this session has been very important, I think, because it's important to have civic education around how what a city budget is and what it's responsible for. Because many people, they're busy with their lives, so they're not watching how this process works. So I think that what council has done in terms of asking for a more accessible budget, a more understandable budget with these types of sessions is very important, frankly, for strengthening our democracy. It's also important that we have information and data so that we can have advocacy for vulnerable populations. That's one of the reasons why, I got into politics is, frankly, to ensure that children, frankly, in my ward, where we have a high prevalence of children living in poverty, have access to a better future through proper social service investments, our investments in economic development. It's also important that we hear from you now because the planning for budgets is long-term. So, I share, your sentiment, Francis, that things need to change immediately. If I could wave a wand and change it or snap my fingers, I would definitely change things. But budgets and city governance are processes that require long-term planning. And so if we're going to see some shifts in terms of investments, it's important that we have a continual dialogue, and that leads to change. The other element on my slide that you might see, which I think is very important, and it appears on every slide, is that our annual municipal budget demonstrates what the city's priorities should be. And that's why it's important for us to be directly connected to you so that we can hear what we should be focusing on. Next slide. So in the previous budget, which was I consider a transitional budget, because when we come into a new term, we have to make sure that the lights are on. And so there isn't the in-depth conversation that you would have in a regular budget process. But in the last previous budget, we did allocate $400,000 for equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. So these are additional dollars to aid in the adopting of the city's anti-racism strategy, women and gender equity initiatives, and Indigenous relations. Next slide. So what are those initiatives? Those initiatives emerge from plans. And in November of 2018, the city approved a reconciliation action plan for interaction with the Indigenous community. In November 2020, the city created an anti-racism secretariat or an anti-racism office to deal with the challenges of diverse communities. In March of 2022, Council approved an Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation Cultural Protocol and Implementation Plan. And in June of 2022, Council approved its anti-racism strategy with 28 recommendations and 132 actions to be implemented over the next 5 years to proactively identify and remove systemic barriers in city policies, programs, and services. So we've created the roadmap. Next slide. Now, we took a survey of people who were going to participate in this process for the Indigenous, Black, and racialized communities in terms of this equity consultation. So we asked people to answer questions, and of course, it was not a large number who actually were able to reply, but there were themes that emerged. And the themes that we saw from the questions that we had asked was in terms of priorities, anti-hate funding, so increased anti-hate funding, increased social service investments, and as we had heard, affordable housing. Specifically for immigrants and newcomers who are finding accessing housing challenging. Next slide. So some of the questions we asked are you actively engaged in the city's budget process? And not surprisingly, the majority of people who had responded said that there was a lack of time, that there was difficulty accessing the process, or that they did not feel included. And this is the reason why we're holding this consultation, and we've been trying to hold these consultations over the last several years, is to create an avenue for people to understand the process and to become involved. Next slide. Which service is the most important, in your opinion, to receive additional funding in 2024? Everybody answered social and housing services. who responded to this specific survey. So we were not surprised by that either. The next slide. Do you feel that there is adequate anti-hate funding to help support community organizations and educational programs in addressing and preventing hate crimes? Everybody said yes, and that's not surprising. I know when I came into office, there was a discussion around the reestablishment, as example, of the hate crimes unit at the Ottawa Police Service. So with everything that's going on in the world, there is an interest in ensuring that we are especially focusing on educational programs to address the rising amount of hate in our community that's being observed by many community members. Next slide. We asked people to rank their concerns in order of importance to their household. And the response that we saw was affordable housing being number one, followed by rising property taxes, reliability and affordability of transit, followed by affordable recreation, road safety and renewal of roads. And it's interesting in the context of an equity survey versus a ward-wide survey, because I think in our ward survey, we were seeing winter maintenance and road safety more at the top, and then affordable housing. But the fact that affordable housing is at the top, I think, bears witness to what we're hearing from the community. Next slide. Asked whether an increase in anti-hate funding in Ottawa aligns with the city's commitment to promoting diversity and inclusion and can contribute to a safer, more welcoming, and equitable community for all residents. And so we were curious in residents' opinions, how would they rank the importance of the following reasons to increase anti-hate efforts? And the number one answer was combating hate crimes, followed by promoting inclusivity and diversity, and three, addressing hate and racism. Community education is high on the list, as well as support for victims, community empowerment, and policy development. Next slide. We asked which city services do you value the most and are most concerned about and use on a regular basis. And community services came to the top. It's interesting, childcare was one of the areas that was identified. That's also interesting when you compare it to what we saw in terms of the ward consultation, where childcare services were more at the bottom of the list. So I think that this does reflect the realities that we see on an everyday basis. Next slide. This is also interesting. How satisfied are you with the services you chose above? So the services that were identified. And unfortunately, it seemed that people were either indifferent or not very satisfied. So I think it means that we have to do more work in terms of the provision of services. And I think that this makes sense when we think about the challenges in accessing childcare or the quality of affordable housing or dealing with the housing system. It would make sense that people would not be very satisfied. I know it's very challenging for our offices when we get these inquiries, and we're aggravated. So we can imagine the people who are accessing the services and services that people are depending on, critically. They're having challenges with that. So we hear you on that. Next slide. So based upon what I heard in terms of consultations like this, talking to community members on a regular basis, and the survey, though the survey sample was extremely small, I can say without a doubt that some of the budget priorities that we are going to be advocating for in this budget cycle for the diverse communities is around a seed funding for anti-hate initiatives, greater social service investments, and affordable housing. Next slide. Joseph kind of talked about how to get involved in the process, but obviously resident input and feedback are integral to the development of the city's budget. Residents, businesses, and community groups can all take part as public delegations, as you heard. So you can come to committee, you can speak. I'm actually encouraging community members to do that, because it's one thing to say that to me, and trust me, I understand what your concerns are. We want to ensure that the entire city understands the concerns and council as a whole understands the concerns. And the way you do that is by delegating. So we invite you to do that. We also want to emphasize that residents can provide feedback through 311 and through online feedback tools. And so there's a tool online. There's going to be a new suite of tools, which I'm going to be excited to actually evaluate, I'm sure, along with my colleagues, to see what their impacts can be in terms of public consultation. But we want to encourage you to use those tools. And then my final slide, please, Michelle. And of course, you can always contact me in terms of questions, whether it's by email, forms like this, or leaving messages or talking with my staff.
Thank you for the presentation, Councillor. We are going to continue to pause and go directly to our next presentation, and then we will go into questions from the floor and from the chat. So if you can introduce our next presenter, Councillor.
Excellent. Well, I do want to introduce Christina Charles, who is here from Quake Lab, and what we are going to have here is a presentation based on some of the priority areas that we have identified. So my office is working with Quake Lab to really continue to identify the gaps that you have been talking about, Francis. In order for us to address them, I think what we frankly need to do is do a little bit of quantitative measurement as to what is required to address the gaps that we're seeing.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I think before you become a councillor, we used to meet and we discussed the same thing that you were talking today, and that's where I'm talking about it.
Absolutely.
And since you've been elected as a councillor, it become hard. Even the mayor of the city of Ottawa, it's hard. There's nobody. They think maybe the main thing we're gonna go to beg for money. It's very hard. How many times I call the city of Ottawa to meet with the mayor and give the concern, because I've been working with the community for a long time.
Well, we're going to start with the presentation.
Thing that I want to address.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to start with the presentation, but what we're working on is quantifying the need. We can't address the need without quantifying it. And so my office is working with Quake Lab to start to identify some of the challenges that we've seen around social service investment. And that's why Christina is here to provide a brief presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to move a little closer to the microphone to make sure that I can be heard. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for the great presentation so far. My name is Christina Charles. I am the data lead at Quake Lab, which is a small Black-owned inclusion agency in the city. And we work together in order to mainly improve the employment scene for people from diverse marginalized communities. And Councillor King's office was kind enough to reach out to us for a little bit of assistance with a really important project that surrounds the African, Caribbean, and Black Wellness Resource Center. If you can go to the next slide. Today, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction of the project, of ourselves, as well as the different people who are working on the project, an overview, and then I hopefully will have a few moments for questions at the end. Next slide. So, like I said, my name is Christina. Our CEO is Sharon. I wonder if anybody in the room has had a chance to meet her. She's fantastic. And actually, the person who started the African, Caribbean, and Black Wellness Resource Center is actually here in the room. So I'd like to recognize Tony, Miss Tony at the back of the room. if you've ever had a chance to meet her as well. She's a force to be reckoned with. And so the work that we're doing on this project is really going to speak directly to some of those questions, comments, and concerns that people have had about how we can direct funds to better assist social initiatives, especially those that target marginalized communities. So myself and Susan, we were at the ACB this morning. We were there to see how the food bank was working and how seniors programs are working and things of that nature. So we're really excited to get started. Yes, next slide. So this is really a project about inclusion, as I mentioned. That's really our area of expertise. It's also a project about accessibility, and it's a project about equity. So we know that there is funding available from private sources, from public sources. We know that money is flowing. However, with many industries, these systems were set up at a time in history when they may have been created for people who don't necessarily look like us or who don't necessarily need the services that people like we do need. And so we are basically taking this opportunity to explore some anecdotal evidence that suggests that some of our small grassroots organizations that are trying to access funding in order to be able to get started, in order to be able to grow, in order to be able to expand, to hire staff and things of that nature are not coming through the pipeline. And so really, in the big picture, why we're so passionate about this is because it's about the redistribution of wealth. So, there are, besides the public sector, there's a whole private sector of funders who have access to large amounts of wealth for historical reasons and who engage in philanthropic work in order to redistribute that wealth. And we want to make sure that we're able to access that now that our communities are increasingly diverse, as Councillor King mentioned, especially with a lot of a big influx of immigrants as well. Next slide. So I'll take you through an overview of what we'll be doing. It's actually a project in two parts. The first part is a focus on the ACB specifically. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that part one is really going to be an opportunity for us to look at how we can better support the ACB as one example of a small grassroots organization. So they are committed to educating, enriching, empowering members of the community in our area. They're just located, down at the corner of Donald and Saint Laurent. So they're very much local. They provide all sorts of services, including a food bank, including senior services, youth services, including, music programming and wellness services and immunization clinics and all sorts of valuable resources for our community. And so we just begun this project, this process of understanding the funding journey that the ACB has already taken. And we're also conducting secondary research, which is when we are researching other primary sources of information. So whether that be academic sources or, journal articles as well that come from this community and also come from elsewhere where we can find best practices, basically. Our deliverables are bold at the bottom, so we're hoping in part one to quantify the impact of the ACB. Since Ms. Tony is working on her own, as you had just mentioned before I started, it's hard to justify providing funding for something that we don't know the impact of. And we understand that. And when you're such a small grassroots organization, it can be hard to get information about, for instance, the number of people who are using your services and the demographics of those people. So what different communities are you touching? What type of linguistic needs do those people have? What type of financial needs do those people have? So we recognize that. If you go to the next slide, we will, you can see that this outlines part 2 of the project, which is really an external and contextual assessment. So not only do we want to look at the ACB here, but we want to connect with other grassroots organizations that are providing similar services to explore whether they are experiencing similar funding challenges. And so this is where we could speak to future funding opportunities through City Council, for instance, where we want to be able to better help all of these different types of organizations that are helping our communities. So in part 2, we will be conducting primary research on the eligibility, the feasibility, and the approval rates of grant applications, whether that be, again, as I mentioned before, private or public avenues for funding. And that'll give us an opportunity to see in what ways do these organizations share similarities, what is making it difficult for them, and what sort of general findings we can make. It's also important to recognize that we at Quake Lab are really dedicated to understanding the systemic and the structural barriers to funding. And so we're in no way putting the onus on these grassroots organizations to have all the answers and to do everything the way that the system expects you to do it. We are actually hoping to do this work in order to make recommendations to improve the way that the system works for people like us. And so our deliverable for part 2 is, really highlighting and spreading the word through the media, through other methods, highlighting and sharing information about the systemic barriers that perpetuate inadequate funding. So next slide is just about questions. I would like to also, before we just go to the questions, is just say that since I have all of you in front of me and also a large group of people online, if you represent a grassroots organization in the Ottawa area, or if you know of one, or if you've heard of one that is experiencing chronic underfunding and not for a lack of trying, then I would really encourage you to please send us an email. The email's at the bottom of the slide, or you can find us on find it on our website, so that those organizations may actually be eligible for part 2, and we may actually be able to have a chance to go out and interview those folks and compile their data with the data from the ACB.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. We're going to pause for a second on the floor. We are going to go to a question in the chat because they've been waiting since before your presentation. I just want to preface by saying that we need to keep each question short, and we really want to help with the questions to guide policy. So we'll go to the question. I think the person's name is Jackie.
Okay, hello, how are you?
Good.
Good. Sorry I couldn't be there to be in person, but I thought I'd jump on the Zoom. My question goes back to earlier, so sorry. In regards to 2 questions. One was for arts and one was for housing. So I heard in mentioning that you guys are putting housing forward as your priority, but I see that you're only saying you have a budget of $400,000. I'm hoping there's more, because $400,000 really doesn't do a lot for housing. And the housing that I'm looking at, in the sense that, 25 years ago, I used to walk downtown across the market, and there were people out there on the streets. Now it's grown tremendously, that there's a lot of homeless people out there. No one wants to be in shelters. And then with the addition of newcomers coming in, I'm almost suggesting that, can we put the plan forward with the number of buildings, because I'm a retired government person who now looks at the vacancy of a lot of the buildings that are there downtown. Can we switch some of those, that they could be constructed or reconstructed, remodeled for the newcomers coming in? Because technically we have space. The space is there. It just means that we have to take our city dollars and put it in there. We're taking money and sending it abroad, sending it to the countries that are at war, and I think we need to focus on sending some of that money right here and place the people that are coming to Canada in these places as opposed to in a gym, in a place with a bunch of different people running around, sleeping. We're putting them in danger. So my focus is really trying to help that diaspora of people and not having them falter to being on the street. The second question is in regards to arts. So I'm part of the Ottawa Jazz Festival, and I'm the board member, one of the board members, and we're really trying to bring a lot of diversity into the festival, capturing Black musicians, etc., as well as Black youth being able to come into our Youth Summit program. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of funding, like how the blues festivals or these other festivals have a lot of funding. So I'm hoping that I can rely on the city to give us some more funding that will allow us, as I push for diversity on the festival, to ensure we can capture more artists of diversity, and especially women. We did that one year. We did get funding from Heritage, and we threw all that money against throwing a women's program and highlighting women artists. So I'm hoping we can do that, because right now we're without a title sponsor. So we are definitely looking at funding from any which way we can to continue the 40 years of what we've built in the Ottawa Jazz Festival, prestigious Ottawa Jazz Festival here. So any way you can help, that would be great.
Well,
Thought
we
I'd put that
appreciate
out
the
there. Thank
work
you.
that you've done in arts and culture, and that contribution is a very strong one. I saw it with my own eyes, maybe not last year because of scheduling, but the year before in terms of the programming. And we would agree with you that there needs to be an increase in cultural and arts funding for diverse communities. I think that is reflected within the anti-racism strategy, and so we have the blueprint. And it would be my hope that in future budgets, that we continue to advocate and carve out some more dollars there. As for housing, I just wanted to clarify that the $400,000 was around investments in the unit itself. So that's, for the equity services piece, more the human resources to ensure that we have the staff working in that area. The city typically allocates on an annual basis between $15 to $16 million to catalyze affordable housing. But I would agree with you, that's not enough. And so it's not enough in terms of the dollars that we need to catalyze the number of construction that we need, especially around affordable housing, supportive housing, housing for newcomers. So we want to advocate for more. That's very important. But you did raise the issue of conversions, and I just want you to know that, frankly, today at Planning Committee, there was a legislative action on conversions, on making it easier for developers to work on those types of projects in terms of fees and in terms of speed of application. So that has been identified, and we're going to continue to work on enhancing that. The challenge, of course, with conversions, I just want to be honest, is that they are expensive. And as a result, some of the conversions that we are seeing are there is affordability, but there isn't deep affordability in some of the projects. And so we need more deep affordability. And we're going to continue to ask staff what are the tools that we can seek to do that, and also talk with senior levels of government to see if there can be support. But I really thank you for those in-depth questions.
Thank you for that question.
Dixon, if I didn't mention my name before. Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. We're going to move to our next question.
Hey, Rawlson.
Hey.
So I am Robin Brown from the 613-819 Block Hub. So Rawlson, on your slides, it said Ottawa's annual budget demonstrates what the city's priorities should be. I'd suggest that any budget actually shows what the priorities are for that whatever organization, right, including the city. So the $400,000 you mentioned for like EDI, anti-racism, indigenous issues. That might sound like a big number until you contrast it with the Ottawa Police Service's dry cleaning budget for last year, which is $500,000. Okay, and these are the same guys, by the way, who charged absolutely nobody from the convoy with hate crimes. So putting more money into hate crimes, the question that. So Brother Eddie mentioned that talked about people misleading people. So I'm going to talk about that. This is where my question is to you. The city manager, Cyril Rogers, is misleading people about, can you move money from the police budget to something else? I attended my budget consultation with Lane Johnson last year, and Cyril got up and said, no, you can't move money. And I said, wait a second. What about the $3 million that got moved under your leadership when you were on the police board? And thank you very much for doing that. What about the $3 million that got moved or withheld from the police budget and put towards mental health? And then Cyril had to go, oh, yeah, accept that. And then he did the same thing this year. So can you please explain the mechanism you guys used to move that $3 million from where it was to where it went?
Oh, it's very easy. We just found efficiencies. So we asked the police service to find efficiencies, which allowed for a greater amount of accessible dollars. So as you might know, the city council can't direct police services. It's a police services board that does that and determines the scale and the scope of the budget. What we had asked for were efficiencies, which were found to the tune of approximately $3 million. The money is scheduled to be collected, so there was more accessible dollars for the portion of the budget that is managed by City Council. So that's what occurred. Obviously, as a city councilor, I don't sit on police services board anymore. I'm not in charge of those budgets, but it's just a question of simple mathematics. If the budget shrinks, then there is more accessible dollars that are available in the city's coffers that would be at our disposal and direction as council.
Thank you so much. We have a question for Christina.
Thank you. Before I pose my question, I just wanted to bienvenue tout le monde, bienvenue dans le meilleur quartier de la ville d'Ottawa, Rideau Vanier. Thank you for being here. My name is Stephanie. I'm the councillor here, and just happy to have you. Happy to have Joseph as well, because we always love getting public servants out this way. And also my ward is number 2 in VUT. So hey, what's up? And my question is for Christina. So one thing that very, very much concerns me is, and I do believe that it is a political decision of the city to sort of put very sort of dire need social services in low-income areas. So, for example, they took Bernard-Grand-Maître as a shelter. This is a very low-income area. The Salvation Army shelter, which, as Rawlson pointed out, shelters are not a solution, is just up the street here, which is one of the poorest postal code for children in the country. And when you take, whether it's Bernard-Grand-Maître, Dempsey, Herongate, to use as a shelter, there's no way to sort of measure the impact on kids and what removing that programming does to those communities. So as an expert, how would you, as a counselor, how would you tell me other than hiring you, how would you tell me to go about getting that kind of quantitative information in the hands of people who can spread the love, let's say, to other neighborhoods who are just more resourced and well-tooled to protest these kinds of measures? How would you suggest I better either advocate or measure so I can say what the impact is? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would definitely start by saying you should hire us. No, I'm just joking. You know what? The impact assessment is a really important part of the puzzle, and I don't think that the structure is there at the moment, especially when it comes to finding the funding to do this. So most of the organizations are working on have a lot of volunteers. Sometimes the leadership is in a volunteer role, barely getting paid. And I just think that the way that a lot of especially the private funding avenues are structured, they want to see results from the money, right? So they want to see you built a new something, or you started a new program, and it's not always glamorous. And exactly. And I think So I think for the moment, for a pragmatic answer is potentially to keep an eye out for the results of this study and the work that we hopefully will be publishing in February, March, and maybe amass some sort of a volunteer group that can go in and spend. It doesn't take that long to assess something like that. A week or two would be more than enough. I know that there are, for instance, charitable organizations or organizations. I think there's one out of Carleton, for instance, that looks at the impact of charitable organizations. And so I wonder what resource you could tap to get a group of intelligent, capable people to actually go in and do that impact assessment. And if you would need resources, we would be more than happy to provide you with the type of database that could get you started, looking at numbers, looking at descriptions, looking at, age demographics and things like that. And then in the future, I hope that we a lot more funding for the real nitty-gritty work that's not glamorous, where you are actually keeping some of these organizations in operation, or making some changes to organizations that you can't just snap a photo of and put at the front of a brochure.
It's not a ribbon cutting.
Exactly.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And yes, I will reach out to you.
Thank you, Christina. Is this question for Christina, or is it for Councillor King? For both, or for Councillor King?
For anyone who can.
Okay, answer. Okay. So I just want to know if there's any more questions for Christina before we go to this question. There is one? Okay. I'm just going to take these questions because she'll be leaving in a minute. You're okay?
I'm good with
Yeah, go ahead.
So I work at a B3 organization as well. It's a Black-led, Black-serving, Black. So essentially my question is, aside from supporting in identifying impact, and doing impact assessments, finding the research, gathering the data, do you guys do funding equity workshops and trainings for organizations who are seeking to bolster their funding capacity, really secure funding? I understand that you work at a systemic level to make the changes up there, but once those changes are made, do you come back to the ground and then really offer those trainings to help us secure that? Or is that something that you haven't yet explored? Are you working to build that in? Like, can we get updates on that? Because I think that there's a lot of value in having that support. So I'm just wondering if we could explore that and what that looks like.
Can you repeat it on the mic?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Right now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, so the question was, can you guys hear me better? Is that good? Okay. So the question is, you guys focus primarily on doing a lot of research and impact assessments, and then you bring your your research findings to policymakers. But when it comes to securing funding and becoming eligible for funding, do you come back down to the resource centers, to the family service providers, and then support them in securing more funding? And do you offer those free workshops and free resources? Because I understand we have to hire you, but do you do pro bono stuff too? Like, how does that work, and can you build that in?
Thank you so much. I really think that that's so much more of a suggestion than a question. I think it is so valuable that you bring that to our attention. I would love to be able to provide, information back to those small organizations. As I said, it's almost like a two-pronged situation where you've got a pragmatic response now, how do we get funding in the door? And then, of course, how do we make change long term? So I'm actually going to take that back to the group and back to our team and see what we can do in terms of that rollout that we already have planned for February, March, and see if we can actually get into some of those organizations. And as I said before, if you wouldn't mind, please send us an email so that we're aware that because it sounds like you'd be a perfect fit also for part 2 of our project, and that way we know that you're out there and we can work together. I will say from the other side we had been focused really on the other side of things, which is the top-down approach, which is really actually trying to make some systemic change. So we in the next calendar year we will be we're working on a really big project right now, which is going to be actually assessing the impact of different funding organizations, especially the top funding organizations in Canada by asset size. And so we're really pleased to be working on that and have that in the pipeline, where we will be hopefully creating a system that will hold those funding organizations with the most money and therefore the most power to better account for the people who need it.
And briefly, I was going to say that this is why it's so important that my office really engage in this study. We had heard very clearly from the community that organizations were not qualifying for the dollars. Right. And so, we need to quantify some of the needs and make that clearer to the city, to say that these are the needs, this is what grassroots organizations are dealing with every day in terms of what they're trying to address, and creating solutions, frankly, for the community that are driven by the community. So it makes sense to ensure that those organizations, those grassroots organizations, have access to that slipstream, the capacity building, and the access to the slipstreams of dollars. Of course. Yeah, of course.
The language barriers, right? The cultural nuances.
Absolutely.
How do we format those things? Like, formatting is already an issue. You know what I mean? Like we have one way of doing things, but the people that are evaluating are going to completely disregard what we just submitted because they're like, this is not the style that we were looking for, right? So just, helping us, develop that capacity and develop the language.
So I see this as a first stage because, as most people would know, as the politicians, we put in the policies, but we're not approving the grants. We're not doing the evaluations. And so we want to ensure that we are giving, we're evaluating the system, seeing where there are deficiencies and seeing where we can address those deficiencies, create the capacity, and eventually see more diverse-led organizations who are providing those services be successful in terms of accessing those dollars. So this is a first step, and I think it's important from what we heard from the community.
Thank you so much.
Yes, good evening. My name is Nurdin Businje. I want to appreciate Joseph for being here. It's really difficult to get a technical official to be in some of these engagements. I'm here to quantify some of the needs that we need to see as people of this community. I am a co-founder of Smart Youth Network Initiative, a youth black-led network organization that builds the capacity of young people to contribute to community transformation. We are aware that young people, the black community, contribute more to the source funding, that is property and construction. I know free friends who have to tie their back because, the heavy work they do, and some of them have to use drugs to get, energy to do the work, but they don't know where their money is going. And as you can check in this room, there are a few young people, generally black people. We don't even have one, we are only like 4 or 5, and yet there are many out there. So my question is that what is the strategy of making sure that we get more young people, more black young people in such spaces to hear their voices, to hear their solutions, and their suggestions in regarding to the budget. The budget process is a very fundamental process, and personally I have a background in budgeting and everything. I feel like every young person, all the kids, the children you left at home, they would be here to listen and share their views. I want to share a solution. Joseph said that the budget process is every day, but there is no a structure where you can, can be like, okay, this is what we want in the next financial year. We don't have that structure. So I really request council if you can really establish a structure or a youth council that, can share our voices, a political one. Yeah. Because you cannot knock on the black door, on the young people's door, they'll be like, who are you? So we want, a political youth structure that can really share our voices beyond. But thank you so much.
I appreciate the question, and I think that there's good news. There's a good answer for you. So number one, that anti-racism strategy is going as a specific area that's looking at youth development, and that's very important, and governance, ensuring that we have more diverse members of our community around governance tables, and addressing specifically the needs for youth. So that strategy is going to do that. There's a number of recommendations. The other element that's more practical that we're working on with Youth Ottawa is the creation of a youth engagement group. And ideally, the proposal that we're working on is the idea of having almost like a mock city council comprised of youth who will actually be able to come to council and discuss issues, and they would represent each and every ward. And we'd be seeking diversity in that group so it truly represents the city. So we are working on some initiatives, and we're going to be pleased to have you involved in those initiatives as well. So I just want you to know that we have given a lot of thought to it, and we are working on solutions to ensure that we have wider youth engagement. You know, it's tough because budgets are complex things. They're very difficult for adults to understand. They're difficult for city councilors to understand. That's why we have expert staff to assist us. But the one key thing that I know that Robin had underlined in the presentation is that budgets are about priorities. And one of the things we are committed to, and I know my good friend and council colleague Stephanie Plante, who's in this room, is dedicated to, is ensuring that we have greater youth engagement. While I don't do that specifically, I've had these types of consultations, virtual, hybrid. Councillor Plante is going to schools and is listening to children and youth and asking for their input about the budgets. So, you know, we are trying, and we're looking at different models. I think the good news is that Councillor Plante and myself are also working on strategies to make this a more child and youth-friendly city. And so you're going to hear more about that, but I want you to know that there is some good work that's underway on that front.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Christina. We will hand claps for Christina's presentation. We are going to be wrapping in a few minutes, but we do have a few more questions for you, and I think it is around housing, childcare. It's also around the nonprofits that we run, so I'll let you ask your question.
Sure.
So one of my questions, this might sound a little ignorant, but you mentioned that transit budgets are split $45 from fares, and then 45% from fares, and then 55% from, subsidies, etc. How can we amend that? Because 45% from people's pockets is not making sense for public transit. Like, it should be free. So how do we make it cheaper? Like, that's just
a question of advocacy. So I've always been for affordable transit.
Okay.
I voted for several fare freezes. There is a structural challenge, though, with the transit budget. We have sizable deficits due to reduced use of transit. But and also primarily we have a feeder system in Ottawa where people used to use the bus and the train to go downtown to go to work. And so we've seen a sizable reduction in terms of usage. We're not where we were before the pandemic because a lot of people, especially in the public service, federal public service, they're working from home. So, there's a lot of structural challenges, but the thing that you are emphasizing is definitely a political decision. Is how do we divide who pays for what, from the transit levy to the fares, and so that's a continuing question. I can say at least on the capital side and even the operating side, I voted against transit budgets because I don't think that we've had the appropriate investments that have been necessary. So I voted against transit operating capital budgets in the past. I'm going to evaluate this one, but I think we have to be realistic in the sense with ridership, with residents, to say if we have a 40 million plus deficit in our transit operating budget, it's going to be very hard to make those services free of charge. So, we're going to examine how we can continue to maintain affordability, because I think that's very important. If we keep on jacking up the fares, nobody's going to
$3.75. Like, I hate riding the bus at this point. Like, I beg my mom for rides. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's come to that point. Do you know what I mean?
And we've had this is one
monthly pass over $100. Like, it's not making sense. Like, it's like. It's encouraging climate, climate change and stuff like that. Like, I'm not trying to adapt to climate change. I'm trying to just get to work and get home. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not in my budgets to to be paying for that much. You know what I mean?
We're
So it's not
concerned
making
about
sense.
affordability of transit and reliability, and that's one of the reasons why my office worked hard on a paper around bus optimization and talking about the economic climate, but primarily the reliability climate of transit. But I would agree with you that we have to ensure that we do as much as possible to keep transit affordable, because I have scenarios, and the reliability is key.
Yeah, why are they coming every 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then even that is a lucky thing. Last question is
Sure.
about housing. So to like what research, how much are you investing in research and development to make housing affordable? Because I know that in the city of Toronto, like they recently, like for vacant homes, they're charging a fee like on vacant homes to avoid Airbnb and Verbo, like rent, like people who are buying multiple houses and just leaving them vacant. So they're putting a tax on that. Is that something that you guys are exploring as well? And how much are you planning on taxing houses that are vacant? Because we need those to stop being vacant so we can get other people in them.
So I can actually re-invite Joseph up to the stage if he's willing, because he's in charge of a project called the vacant unit tax, which we are piloting. So we do have a pilot in place in the city, and you would be best suited.
Toronto because we're not taxing enough. So sorry.
So I will say council did approve a vacant unit tax, which we implemented this year. And we had forecasted, I think we would probably have about maybe 15 to 1,700 units vacant. At this particular point, since we've gone through the process in 2023, we're estimating that we're probably going to have about 4,000 vacant units. So that's significant. So this is a two-pronged approach. A vacant unit tax is a two-pronged approach. One, it helps with the affordability issue by pushing homes back into the market. So I was talking to Council Plant earlier, and I was explaining that in August, we just did a quick inventory of how many houses were for sale in Ottawa. We had about 2,500 houses for sale. If we have 4,000 vacant units, if this tax even pushes back 1,000 back into the market and throw that 1,000 to the 2,500, you're going to see some shifting in terms of pricing, right? It's basically a bit of a domino fall, because the next person that comes to list will say, well, how much did the other house sell for? Well, houses in your streets are now selling for X, so you need to sell for this, right? So if prices start going down, then the market sort of starts to follow that trend, right? So even if we just dumped 1,000 units and cause prices to drop, then it sort of helps with that affordability issue. The other side of it is all the money that's coming in is going towards affordable housing. So we had forecasted about $4 million coming in from this initiative. We're now looking at about $10 million going towards affordable housing, which is a big change. So this will continue. I think there was a debate and a vote earlier in the summer, and against this new council has reaffirmed that they want to continue with the program. So we're full steam ahead, and we'll continue to enforce that and make sure that we see less and less vacancy. And vacancy is caused by a lot of issues, as we're starting to find out. It could be matters of, the speculators, the investors, that's the most common one. But sometimes people sit on their homes for a lot of various reasons, right? And
a lot of diplomats have like homes when they're on mission, and then they keep their home here. So like I understand that, but that's not. The rest of us need houses too.
yeah, but all that to say is we have an initiative in place. We actually rolled out at the same time as Toronto.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I have another
Joseph is so good that he's now counseling other municipalities. We've had some discussions with other municipalities about how to implement this, because this isn't just an issue in Ottawa, it's an issue everywhere. My hometown has literally been decimated by things like vacant unit and vacant storefronts. It's so sad to go back and see that. So thank you, Joseph, for all your work. It's really appreciated. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So it's amazing work that you're doing. So we're glad to have you here. It's around access to space, parks and rec for our youth, particularly Black and Indigenous youth. We've seen access to space limited because of COVID, even shut down in programming and services. How can we help subsidize access to space? Because a lot of the times these spaces are up for rent and the rental the rental amounts are pretty high. A lot of these youth programs aren't able to afford those spaces, and sometimes these spaces stay vacant in schools on weekends, in the gyms, in the cafeterias. We want to, and in the city of Ottawa, some people just don't end up having their events there because it's a little bit more difficult to pay the price. So how do we help subsidize these programs, and how do we even get costs for free, and we start filling up these spaces so the youth can have something to do during these critical hours? Because when critical hours are happening, we see that it's detrimental for our youth. And so what can we do? Because I can tell you that there's a facilitated table, the ACB youth table that's run, where a lot of social services are coming together to discuss these issues, because at least 2 summers ago, that table started due to the fact that everybody was worried what was going to happen during the summer hours. It was, I think, 2021 we started that table. So just wondering from folks, how can we get some resources for access to space for our youth? Because we really do need it during those critical hours, after school and in the hours of the night.
As a political question, I'm happy to answer around some of the initiatives that I'm undertaking with Youth Ottawa and the North Gloucester Giants as an example. So one of the things we're trying to do is enhance partnerships with organizations that do run educational, recreational, and nutritional programs for youth, especially in high priority neighborhoods where we see a prevalence of low income children and youth. So we actually are trying to pilot that in Overbrook at Gilles Julian Park, where the city, I worked with city staff to ensure a very inexpensive lease. So I think it's $1 a year to ensure that those organizations would be able to have unfettered access to that facility. The challenge, of course, is renovating that facility. So the idea is the lease will allow for those organizations to spend dollars on a renovation so that we can have a rich diversity of programming primarily for children and youth. Right now they are running programming as example. So it's a group of different people in the community that are ensuring that the football program that's being run there now, though they want to expand to other sports and to ensure that there's wider gender diversity and participation. But they are ensuring that those kids get free equipment, free training, and so we need to create more partnerships like that. The other thing that we want to do is focus on inventorying the space that we have. So my understanding with parks and recreational facilities is often these spaces are driven by a formula of cost recovery. The city isn't out there trying to make money on these services. It's trying to maintain the level of service. And so it's important for us to also assess where there's excess capacity in the system beyond city services that are being provided. So we're starting to do that work. We're trying to locate different spaces in different schools, in schools that have been sold to private owners who might be able to provide a recreational space at a discount. So I want you to know that we are focused on that, though we're also always focused on attempting to keep pricing low for the user fees for recreational services. Often, unfortunately, it's one-time types of funding that we'll find to provide reduced costs for children in different types of programs. But we're dedicated, obviously, and my office is dedicated to finding greater solutions for our youth that can be leveraged. So we're going to continue to do that, but we want you to know that there's work that's being undertaken.
We have one final question. I'll just ask you to keep it short.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for gathering us tonight in order to discuss about concern, community concern, budget concern. We are having a big gaps between the city when those councillors are elected. They come to neighborhood when they are elected. It's very hard to meet with them. Mayor, whenever we call office, nobody want to respond. During election, they are in our neighborhood. So all this information, we've been here as peaceful minority organizations, we don't benefit from anything. And I think that if the councillor or a mayor or manager or whoever in the city should have to share the information with the peaceful minority like us in order to benefit, because we have people with mental health issues, we have burial language, we also have where we can be able to gather, talk and chat. We cannot just go a house, but we can be able to have a place where we can be able to sit down and discuss issues that concerning us, whether politically or socially. We don't all have those steps. So we, as communities, as a visible minority, we are looking for where we can be able to gather and discuss about our concern with the kids. A lot of people right now, they are in shelter. Our communities, we contribute also to the shelter. Not only some people from Ottawa. In my community, have a couple of people there, women and men, kids, they are in shelter. And nobody wants to listen from us. So what can we do if we have a capacity to sit down and talk culturally, language where we can be able to describe everything in our language, in our culture, in our behavior, the way we do our things. We may not be able to have some people who are in mental health issues. We can be able to address them, how to look for jobs, we can be addressing them, how you can be able to go back to school and do your school, how to do the homework for the school, for your kids, how to do, how to deal with the financials, because some people sometimes they get credit card, they use the credit card as give money, and it's not belong to them, and so on. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I can say that we're dedicated to greater engagement. The engagement has to be structured, and so that's why we are having these budget consultations. In my office, I work with Sophia Jacob, who's here, and we hold biannual community town halls specifically for the Black community to actually voice these types of concerns. And we're supportive of new initiatives that we're seeing, the emergence of the ACB Wellness Resource Center within our ward that is providing space for this type of dialogue and discussion. I think it's important to note that elected officials have a tremendous number of responsibilities and pull on their time. So I try to be out in the community as much as possible, listening to people, going to events, and getting a sense of what investments are necessary. But I can't be everywhere all the time. As example, tomorrow I'm going to probably be in a joint committee meeting that will be talking about a Lansdowne for 12 hours. But after that, we're still in the community. We're still asking people, because we have the legislative responsibilities, we have our responsibilities to the community and the geographic community of the ward. But what I think is important is that what's changing is we're also now directly engaging with cultural communities. That's because of the community itself, which I'm very proud of. So they put pressure when I came into office and said, Rawlson, we need to have an anti-racism office. We were able to establish that. Rawlson, we want to have an anti-racism strategy. We have that. Councillors typically just have ward consultations. We decided to innovate and have this consultation for a wider, diverse group of people. But of course, everybody across the city wants me to be at their event all the time. I only have so much time, and my focus needs to be on the legislation. But the focus also needs to be listening to you, but we've got to do it in a structured way. And so that's why we're having this dialogue, and I'm pleased everybody could join us tonight for this dialogue. And this is the reason why we're going to have a continuing dialogue. The most important thing, too, is that we've set the city on a different trajectory. Right. We said, have this office so that office is also doing the consultation. And the way that government works is that staff provides us with recommendations based on what they're hearing on an ongoing basis. So it's important for us to listen and for us to understand where the policies need to be changed. But it's also important for us to have structures in the government itself with staff who are making the recommended decisions to have the capacity to listen to you. And that's why Joseph is here as well. So I think things are changing, and I share your concern about the speed, because that I understand.
Right.
You're talking about these challenges every day. I know that my council colleague, Councillor Plante, sees them on a regular basis more than we do in Rideau Rockcliffe. But those challenges exist, and we're working hard to try to address those challenges on your behalf. So we just want you to know that, yes, I'm not satisfied with the pace of change, but I think that by virtue of us having this meeting today, something is changing, and I feel it is positive. And we're going to work with community members, with the ACB Community Wellness Center, with yourself, Francis. We're going to work with Quake Lab to undertake research to quantify some of the challenges. And we're going to present that to council, to the mayor, so that we have a roadmap. Because it's one thing for us to listen to the challenges, and we understand, we have a good sense of what the challenges are, but we need to quantify the asks so that when we go in a budget process before our council colleagues and before staff, we can say, we have all the data and we understand the changes that are needed based on the aggregated data that we have. So I just want you to know that we are committed to that, and that's why I'm so pleased that you've been able, and everybody's been able to participate in this process tonight.
Thank you so much, Councillor, and thank you so much, Joseph and Christina. We really appreciate you guys coming. Hand claps for our presenters. And we'll just allow the councillor to give closing remarks, and then we will close the session.
Well, once again, just briefly, I know it's been a little bit longer in terms of this session than had been scheduled, but they're very important conversations, and it's very important that we listen to you. So I really want to thank you for being here. I also value the idea of listening before tabling. Often a budget is tabled, and then there are questions that might be asked, but there's little change. I think there's a better potential for there to be change in the budget when we hear community members articulating what they would like to see in that budget before it's tabled. So that's the reason why we decided to go forward with this model. And like I said, there are opportunities to continue to provide input. So I would really invite you, if you are really serious about getting involved in the budget process, to come before committees and talk about the measures and investments that you would like to see. It's actually quite important that the rest of the city hears that, because we understand it. We're sympathetic to the changes, but I think it needs to be heard on a wider level, and we need to continue to work on quantifying the data that would support those changes. So once again, I really want to thank you so much for being here, both virtually and in person. And of course, before you leave, please take some food, because we have some excellent food from an excellent member of our community, and we want to emphasize that too. But thank you so much, everybody, here in person at the Hub and at home. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rawlson.
Thank you.